still very manly. Oh, it's Friday night. It's Sports Talk with Zeca Marques. Good evening, and hope you've had a great week. We're looking forward to the weekend. You can start unwinding, chilling, thinking about things to enjoy. Tonight's show, very special one. A very good friend of mine, someone that is becoming innovative in the sports world, forward thinker, Evert de Bruin. There's a lot to unpack today with you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Zeca. Pleasure to be here.
Evert, we're going to talk about the main purpose of you being my guest today, but let's start off with, how did you get involved in football? You're a sports lawyer, a FIFA accredited agent. How did this thing come about?
Well, it's a particularly long story, so I'll shorten it.
We've got an hour.
Fair enough. I am an attorney by profession, and about 12 years ago, a colleague of mine approached me. At that time, she was working at SAFA, South African Football Association. And she invited me to come have a look at what they were doing, see if I could help. At that stage, they needed qualified lawyers to provide certain services to players and clubs on a pro bono basis. I was happy to oblige, and 12 years later, I'm still very much trying to do very much that. But in short, that's really how I started getting involved in football. I'm still in football. In fact, at this point in time, football is from my legal practice point of view, the main income generating part of my practice. And I'd like to think that I've become a specialist in the football legal space. The agent license is something that's come about recently, and I'm sure we'll delve into it. But as of 2023, FIFA have now once again opened up their licensing accreditation system, and take into account my knowledge and my experience and my network within the football industry. I decided to get the license so that I could help and assist players and clubs moving forward. So, in a nutshell, that's how I got into football.
Now, I know that as a lawyer, you qualify as a lawyer, then you specialize into something. Did you
Yes.
do law and then you thought, I'm going to do sports? How does it come about? How did you become a sports lawyer, for example?
Well, no, initially, no. Initially, the idea was, I think, as most lawyers do, just to be able to find a job and to start working. But about, I would say, 7 to 8 years into being a lawyer, I started doing some work, as I mentioned earlier, with SAFA, and then from there with individual players and agents. And at that point in time, I took an interest in football and sports in general, and I decided to take my studies further, more than just the LLB and the accreditation that I had at that point in time. And I decided to go and do a sports law, an international sports law masters in Madrid. That I did post-COVID in 2021-22. And that very much gave me the further education and skill set to then to be able to take my practice to the next level, which I've subsequently done. So that was a very nice feather to add to the bow. And yeah, if you were asking me about the specialist field, sports law and in particular football is not very much known as a specialist field, but over the last few years it very much has become so. With most industries, whether it is in business or anywhere else, the moment that there's a lot of money that goes towards something, then the lawyers will follow. And I don't think myself and all my colleagues that specialize in this field locally and abroad are any different. So as we know, and as I'm sure we'll touch on, football is big business, and for the more reason you'll find a lot of lawyers there, because it not only allows you to generate a living, but also to do so within something that you're particularly passionate about, like I am with football and sport as a whole.
So I'm just curious to find out that through sports, it's become a niche. Let's use the word niche for you, as a lawyer. how important is it for an athlete to have someone that understands sports law, or do you just go to a normal lawyer and try and he fights your case? How important is the difference between a sports lawyer and a normal lawyer?
So the answer is quite diverse, but effectively, as I mentioned earlier, the business of sport, and particularly football abroad and locally, is becoming bigger and bigger by the day. For that very reason, advising people down the right pathway is absolutely critical. Football, from a business point of view, but also from a performance point of view, is becoming increasingly more challenging. The environment is becoming increasingly more challenging. Every a youngster, boy or girl, and particularly their parents as well, want them to take on a career in football. But that unfortunately doesn't always happen. But that doesn't always, it's not always just because of talent or dedication. There are many moving parts to the football business. So why somebody like myself, for argument's sake, adds value is to navigate those pathways. The football industry has many rules and regulations that normal people on the street aren't familiar with. So if you blindly walk into a career in football, you may be very much disappointed by what you find, not because you don't have the requisite talent, but unfortunately because you have trusted people in the wrong places in order to give you opportunity that may or may not come to pass. We can go into a bit more detail, but ultimately, without properly understanding the football landscape, and I'm talking more so about contracts and development and the employment relationship between a player and a club, the transfer market, when and how players get moved and transferred and sold, and their economic rights get transferred and sold, it makes it very challenging for a player to reach his full potential if they are not aware of these things that need to be navigated. So to answer your question, if you believe that your child has a future in football for one reason or the other, then it's important that you obtain the requisite level of advice in order to be able to take the right decisions at the right time, whether that's from a football lawyer like myself, whether that is from somebody in the game that has experience, a coach or a mentor or a former player, or even an agent. It's absolutely critical that happens, because you will be disappointed. Unfortunately, it's the nature of the industry, and without proper advice, you more often than not see people making the wrong decisions about their career. Once again, agents serve a critical purpose, and more often than not, people will come to me, young professionals, and say that this agent told them to do this when it was probably not the right decision to make. Parents also blindly follow the lead of clubs, thinking that it's the right opportunity for their children. And unfortunately, because the football landscape is so diverse but also incredibly competitive and unfortunately not always pretty, the decisions that get made are not the right ones, because people trust instead of taking advice. And that's unfortunately the reality of football.
So, do you think people like yourself, who's a sports lawyer and a FIFA agent, have the edge on someone that's just an agent? And do you think it's one of the reasons why FIFA is trying to close all the loopholes? Because let's be honest, the football world is dog eats dog out there. The football world is so complicated and people take advantage of people's ignorance. Do you think that someone like yourself, who's a FIFA agent, accredited FIFA agent, the key word here is FIFA, accredited FIFA agent, is also accountable if something goes wrong or not?
So I think I wouldn't say that being a lawyer makes me a better agent, but I do think that the reason why FIFA have brought back the FIFA accreditation and the license and the exam that you need to take is because they wanted to create a higher level, a higher standard of the types of agents that are in the game. Whether you're a lawyer, whether you're an accountant, whether you're in any kind of field. The purpose isn't necessarily, and I don't believe it was, to exclude people that weren't, let's say, of a legal or an accounting background, but really to create a higher standard of agent because of the fact that, as you mentioned, advantage is taken of those that are perhaps in a position to be taken advantage of. Young players with talent who are being advised by the incorrect people in order to make certain moves or to do certain things. It does help to be a lawyer. That much is true. The FIFA agent exam lends itself to in excess of about 4 different legal documents, constitutions of FIFA, disciplinary codes, regulations relating to transfer and status of players, and yes, it is easier to be able to navigate those rules and regulations if you have a legal background, but it's not essential. I think the reason why FIFA have made the exam so difficult is so that a certain caliber of people can pass. Those caliber of people, more often than not, have the kind of ethical and moral characteristics in order to help players on the right path. Unfortunately, agents have received a very bad reputation,
and some of them rightfully so.
Yes, and the reason is because they don't have the kind of ethics that FIFA would like agents to have. A lot needs to be said about the conduct of other stakeholders in football, such as clubs and associations and coaches. But to a large extent, agents do have a obligation in order to protect the rights of players and to ensure that they get the proper advice. And the more difficult the exam is, and the higher the standard is that is expected, and accountability that's expected of agents, the better the industry is as a whole, and the better representation players will get.
I agree with you. I think it's a question of trying to clean up the industry. Being a coach, I understand that sometimes the clubs try and take advantage of the players not being informed or not having an agent that knows the laws, and even for youngsters, parents sign documents, 5-year contracts where
Correct.
It's ridiculous, and the clubs just like to take advantage.
Yeah.
So someone like you does definitely make a difference, I can tell you now. And knowing you, Everett, you firstly, you're passionate about the game. I know your work ethics. You try and do the right things all the time. And you're a man of vision. And this is where I'm going. The man of vision is about, because you have so much passion for the game, you've now gone, I don't know where you got this idea from, and you've created this Sports for Business conference. Unpack this for me.
Yeah, so on the 8th and 9th of November, we will be having a football business conference. It's something that I have put together with an organization called CEOs in Sport, and we've partnered with Stadium Management South Africa, who are the company that runs F&B Stadium. The event will be at F&B Stadium over 2 days. The first day and second day will be various speakers coming to basically educate and to convey their stories and experience, and we're hoping to be able to get as many people there. We've made the event incredibly affordable for people to come and attend.
What is affordable for you?
Well, so
knowing that it's 2 days.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about it's 2 days. What are you going to get in those 2 days?
Right. So we've got 3 different packages, but in principle, the main package is for the 2 days. It's 2,500 Rand. It includes 2 full days of conference. First day, lunch and a network function, food and drink on the house. Second day, lunch, and then we're finishing it with a Kaiser Chiefs and Relay M fixture that starts at 5:30. So we'd like to think that for that price, we've made it as affordable for people that want to attend. Particularly take into account, the kind of market that we're looking for, which is anybody that's willing to learn about the football industry in South Africa. So we hope people will engage and attend. We've had some very good feedback. We have had a very good uptake of tickets and interest so far. Hopefully by the time that we go live, we'll have sold out and have as many good people to come and attend.
You said so sold out. What numbers are we looking at?
Well, so maximum capacity is 80, right? It's 82.
That should sell out the first day.
Well, like I said, we've had some very good uptake. So hopefully by close of business tomorrow we'll be sold out. But I mean, we're being realistic. We understand that not everybody has the kind of money lying around, but ultimately, we believe that we'll be sold out. Yes, by the time we open doors. But yeah, fantastic initiative from myself. Well, not from myself, but from the partners that we've teamed up. And to answer your earlier question, why did we do it? Because we wanted something like this and to attend something like this, and nobody else was doing it. So we wanted to reach out to people, find out who was willing to do it with us. We found some fantastic people to work with, and like I said, the uptake's been brilliant. And as you mentioned, it's something that everybody wanted to have, and hopefully, it's going to get the kind of traction that we think it will.
What type of guest speakers will you have there? I know I've seen the list. It's quite a broad list.
Yes.
And what was the idea behind that?
Sure.
The list.
So 2 days is a long time and lends itself to a lot of people that can come and talk. So we initially wanted to break it down into two aspects. First day is a very much a breakdown of football, but on the field, technical and tactical, very much how and what goes on within a football club and how they go about dealing with their players, how they go about involving things such as data analytics, performance analysis, and then also...
And who's doing that?
Right, so at this point in time, we've got a number of speakers. We've got Roscoe Creeling, the head of Supersport United's academy, coming to talk to us about everything from what it takes to scout a player, talent identification, what it then means to go into the academy, the kind of values and goals that they set for their players, and then ultimately lending those efforts into gearing the players to become professionals in their first team. After that, we'll have Mr. Calvin Watt from Supersport Schools to come and talk to us about what Supersport Schools are doing, how they've very much changed the landscape for youth football in the country, making it accessible and watchable for everybody else, and basically just coming to tell us what new things they've got in store for the channel. I'm going to talk as well.
What is your task?
So my topic will be the training and development compensation, which I think it's something I'm very passionate about.
You're going to have a long talk.
Well, I think it kind of lends itself to clarifying a couple of things, hopefully educating some people about what it really means. At the end of the day, one of the reasons that we complain in South Africa is, where's the money coming from to develop the next generation of Bafana players, and the answer is really staring us in the face. It's basically a set of rules that have been applied all the world around, and
not applicable, yeah?
Well, largely,
people
yes.
just don't do it because they're misinformed.
Both, unfortunately. But before I spill all the beans, there's a significant disconnect between clubs and academies and players and expectations from everybody within the industry about how this training and development compensation scheme should work. And the purpose of the conference is really to try and help people along the way, identify what challenges they are, how to fix them, and then what the realities are of how to implement it. Because ultimately the goal of the scheme is to allow money to flow down from the professional ranks into academies and youth football in South Africa, which is not happening. And if we're going to stand around waiting for government or for private investment to come and solve the problem, I think we might be disappointed. And then we've got Brendan Fourie from Stellenbosch to come and talk to us about the effect that data analytics has on how they go about recruiting players. For those of you that are familiar with South African football, they are very much a team that is forward-thinking and moving in the right direction in terms of competing with the big guys, as we've seen now recently, MTN 8 final against Orlando Pirates, unfortunately losing, but for a team that was promoted 4 years ago, they've kind of broken the mold, and a large part of that is their recruitment strategy and how they implement data and analytics in order to do that. So Brendan's going to talk to us about that. We've got Sinasipo Mali, who's the head analyst at Bafana, and employed by Seiko Kune. He's going to come and talk about performance analysis and how they work with players in order to gauge where and what and how they need to improve or to adjust and to recover. We've got Stan Matthews, CEO of Supersport United, coming to talk to us, and then just about the day-to-day running of a football club, and then Fleming Berg, who's the sporting director at Sundowns, coming to tell us how the transfer market works, how they utilize it in order to buy players, sell players, generate revenue, and ultimately become a much better team to compete not only in South Africa, as they've done successfully over the last couple of years, but also on the continent in CAF and gearing towards the FIFA Club World Cup, which kicks off this year, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of interesting people to come to talk. That's just the first day. Second day, we've got a bit of a different approach, which is a bit more commercially minded. We've got a lot of people coming to talk about how do we get fans into seats in South Africa.
I could tell you that myself.
Well, we've got some interesting people to come and talk about that. Carrie Delaney, who's the head of MSC Sports. They work with Chiefs, Pirates, and whoever from a marketing and commercial point of view. We've got Nkobile Ndlovu, who is a incredibly smart guy and works with. He works for himself, but he works with Nielsen Sport and with Supersport and so on in order to crunch the numbers and kind of understand what kind of impact things like broadcasting have on the South African marketplace. And then, of course, we've got Jack Kearns, Glenn Binken, and a couple of other chaps to come and talk about the agents side of things. Jack is also a licensed agent, and he is giving courses and classes to to persons who want to become licensed agents. So they will have a first-hand experience of what these regulations entail, what it's required, and why they are there. And then we've got Matthew Booth to come and talk to us about his foundation, which he started, which largely helps kids in previously disadvantaged communities, trying to build the bridge between corporate, commercial, private, and and youth development in those areas. And then we're going to have a lot of fun watching the game as well. All things in between. So that's what we're looking forward to having everybody there and seeing that having a fantastic event is important as well.
Yeah, just listening to the list of people that you've invited, I must say it's for anyone that's interested in football, and we've got to divide this thing in two. One is football as a sport,
yes,
and other one is understanding the industry. And I think, and I'm not wrong in saying that the majority of people don't understand the industry.
Yes.
And then they complain about why certain things. So do you think it is like an educational bridge to educate
Yes.
people out there understand the industry of football?
Correct. So that's one of the main reasons we wanted to do it. within the confines of my legal practice and the work that I do with my clients, that's one of the main frustrations that gets borne out. And unfortunately, more often than not, clients who come to me, whether it's parents of young footballers or professional footballers or agents, very much have an academic understanding of the industry, but more often than not, struggle to really come to terms with all the ins and outs. And I think to a large extent also coaches. I think a lot has to be said about coaches who are passionate about the game, who focus predominantly all their energy on what happens between the white lines, but aren't aware of the business aspect of it, and get frustrated by when they don't get an opportunity, or when they aren't able to recruit a player, or why the owner isn't paying them more. So I think to a large extent, once we start talking and having frank conversations about where South African football is at the moment, and where it could be, we're going to have a lot of frustration and people experiencing this disconnect. And the purpose of the conference is to a large extent to try and just communicate these different aspects and educate people, as you say, about other elements that come into play. Football is not like conventional business. It's an entirely different dynamic with entirely different machinations, and ultimately, in South Africa, we are still somewhat behind the rest of the world, and until we understand...
How many years do you think? I'll give you my opinion.
Tell me.
I would say 100.
Okay. I think you're probably overestimating it.
Mindset-wise, organization, understanding the dynamics, understanding why you're involved in football, the industry itself. Right. We haven't caught up to you've got to use Europe as a benchmark. Europe do things a little bit different.
So, and okay, to give you some context and to answer your question and give you my opinion, I'm currently busy reading one of Alex Ferguson's many biographies, and in this biography he very much sets out the landscape as it was when he took over at Manchester United, how rudimentary and informal and very much amateurish certain things were still in the 80s and 90s in the UK. I can see a lot of that within our current landscape. That doesn't apply to everybody, but to a large extent it does. So if you want to ask me how far behind we are, probably about 20 to 30 years. That being said, with where things are from a governance, from a intelligence point of view and a technological point of view, we can catch up those 20 to 30 years in 10 years. So maybe the answer is somewhere in between, right? 10, 15, 20, maybe. But it will take a generational change in the mindset. One of the big frustrations I hear a lot from people within the professional space in South Africa is how owners of football clubs still have a very, very old school mentality to how things are done. The words lack of vision, or fear of change, right? Or
no, I don't think it's fear of change and lack of vision. Sorry to interrupt you there, but I think it's more a question of power and authority. I can, I will, and it's my club.
Well,
and that's the problem. When you employ someone to do a job, you employ him to do a job. You don't employ him to control him and tell him how to do his job. And that's why, as long as this mindset persists, it's never going to change. And it's not going to change because...
But there's also a reason why that mindset exists, is because to a large extent the owners of football clubs, and perhaps the top teams are the exception to the rule, but these are individuals who have made their own money in their own spaces, in their own businesses. And in saying that, they have pumped in a significant amount of money into these football clubs that they own. So, take into account how much money they've placed into these clubs and the risk of relegation causing the value of this asset to depreciate significantly, almost to a negligible amount. It lends itself to a fear and anxiety that encroaches upon these individuals, and that's why you have this overbearing and overpowering mindset, where they would rather do it themselves than let other people do it for them.
So
You've got
so they'd rather
Hmm.
get relegated by themselves than getting someone maybe to help them
Well,
avoid relegation, because that's what most of them do in any case.
Yes, but I think there's perhaps a bit more nuance to that. They would rather know that they're in control and suffer the consequence of relegation than lending it and handing it over
Is
to
that
somebody
being
else.
clever?
Well, with the experienced personnel that we have in the country, or the quality of no, of course the answer is not. But at the end of the day, that happens, and there's not much you can say and
No,
do
no,
about
I
that.
agree with you, and that's
Um,
why it happens.
Mm.
And it's interesting we discussed this, because this is exactly why you're creating this conference, is to try and educate people that football has moved on.
Mm.
And I was having a chat the other day when I was in Angola, that we as coaches, and that's, I'm going to use this phrase, we as coaches are judged on other people's incompetence. And I'll tell you why. Because we need to get qualified to get a coaching course. The majority of those people around us have got no qualifications, don't know their functions, they've got no admin qualification whatsoever, don't know how to run a club, and they're running the club because they have the impact. And this happens in Angola as well, by the way. I'm talking in general now. This is the industry of football. And it happens in Portugal as well, because I talk to my colleagues and they say, listen, I've got the chairman who comes at half time and adds his 2 cent pieces because he is putting the money into this club.
Yeah.
He thinks he has the right. But the expert is given the job to do this function, but he's got no say.
Yeah.
Well, when I say no say, 90%. That's got to change. And I hear where you came from, but it's the fear of like, oh, this is my money, I don't want to lose it, but then you employ an expert to come and do it. The problem is not the expert, the problem is you're employing the wrong expert to do it.
So, in my personal experience, where a lot of football clubs in South Africa unfortunately get it wrong, is not the coach, and more often than not, it's not the players. It's the staff and the administration and the entire business model.
The support staff. Yes.
Because I think to a large extent there isn't a belief that is a necessity in a football club.
No,
Because-
I tell you, sorry to interrupt you again, because I have to. If I don't, I forget. I tell you what the problem is. They rather put a family member there to look after the business, and to give him the information on a daily basis, so that he's in touch with what's happening in the club. And those people are not skilled.
Well, that lends itself to another element, which is trust.
Yeah.
And trust in the football dynamic is unfortunately not something that's particularly front of mind. If you're not within a football club, but it becomes very apparent because, unfortunately, the type of people that have historically been within football are those that think with their stomach instead of their brain.
Spot on.
And
Yeah.
so what you tend to find is that unless a owner has hands-on control, those that work beneath him within administration and within the business side of the football club will exploit, and unfortunately that's kind of very much where a lot of football owners get also this mindset of, okay, well, I have to be hands-on with everything, and then
I have to be hands-on, but I can't be there, and I'll play someone who's going to tell me on a daily basis what to do.
Sure.
And that's the problem.
Exactly. So ultimately, you can have your own opinion about whether family-run football clubs are successful or not. We've got a few in South Africa.
There's nothing wrong with that, as long as they're skilled.
Correct. So let's leave that aside.
Yeah.
The football business as a whole does and should work much better if you have skilled employees at every different level. Unfortunately, that comes at a cost. In the South African market at the moment, you need to be very selective about who you pay and what you can pay, because notwithstanding what people may think, South African football is not as lucrative and wealthy, notwithstanding certain people saying that it's the best league in Africa. So there's still a lot of penny pinching in South African football, and unfortunately that's probably not going to change unless there's a collective, concerted effort in growing the league, and growing the sport, and growing the business behind it all. There have been some positive movements, and I'm happy to sort of discuss. But ultimately, where we are as a nation when it comes to football is still a bit behind, and there's a significant amount of room to grow. With the right people, with the right kind of growth mindset, we can become a real competitor, not only on the African continent, but I do think internationally as well. We are behind, but we've seen it with other sports in this country, right? There's no reason why we can't compete at a international level, and it's really just about having faith in skilled people and appointing them into positions and lending themselves or giving them the opportunity to be able to perform. But those people are being frustrated. They're not necessarily always getting those opportunities. So the idea of the Football Business Conference, just to get back to that, is to create a place for them to come and learn and talk, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward from there.
Evert, I give you credit because you, one person plus your colleagues, 3, okay, are trying to change the mindset of people that impact business. Okay, and football's got to be seen as big business. And you can't just run football as a big business with a narrow-minded mentality. You've got to have a growth-minded mentality. So what you're doing is admirable. I'm telling you right now. I've been there. I've seen it. I go to Europe frequently. You were in Europe and you saw the dynamics of how the industry operates. And the fact that you're trying to say, guys, we need to wake up because you see the potential.
Yes. So the most challenging thing for me in South African football is the endless potential we see and just the things that are happening that cause us not to reach. The fundamental thing behind any endeavor, right, particularly in sport, is that when you want to grow it, you are very much reliant on commercial partners to do so. To give you an example, the PSL is an organization of 32 clubs, and ultimately they all receive a grant, a money subsidy at the end of every month in certain periods, which they utilize to run their business. Now, they do so from the broadcasting revenue and sponsorship revenue that the PSL collects as a whole, and then it flows down to the clubs. And the bigger the revenue from broadcasting, from sponsors, the more money will go to clubs. Now, that's a very simple and, in principle, a breakdown of how the football business in South Africa works. But ultimately, the challenge that they have is that they are struggling to attract more commercial partners because of the perceived lack of quality.
Would you say it's perception or reality? I would go with from a coaching perspective, it's reality.
Sure. So, but ultimately,
they see it as perception. Yes.
But there's an inherent, challenge in order to bring a commercial partner to the table, because football in South Africa is not run as well as rugby, right? They don't have the same kind of confidence in associating themselves or giving the same kind of money to football in this country, because they don't know that they're going to get the same kind of return. But that is changing, right?
Is it changing?
I hope so. And people, a lot of people have a lot to say about the Betway sponsorship, right? But ultimately, I'm seeing a shift in how football clubs are operating. A couple of years ago, you would say, okay, well, only 1 or 2 clubs are operating in a certain way. More clubs are realizing that it's actually bearing fruit for them to employ qualified coaches, to employ analysts, right? These are the kind of things we wouldn't have heard of 5 years ago. So at this point in time, they are using the little bit of money that they have in good places, right? That's not all of them. But the moment that starts happening, right, the moment that clubs appreciate that their media and communications departments are a significant part of their business, right? How you deal with sponsors, how you deal with corporate partners and commercial partners, right? It makes a fundamental difference. How you interact with your community and your support base and your fan base, right? Then only will you really be able to truly be able to exploit the nature of business and football business in South Africa. That doesn't only apply to one club at a time, but it applies to the collective of clubs and the league as a whole. So once they get that right, you will see more investors and sponsors come to the table and say, we want to participate. I mean, you can have a look at the Springboks to give you an example. They have a list as long as your arm of people. Every type of brand wants to be associated with them because, of course, there's a good connection. And also, hard work is done behind the scenes to foster and to keep these relationships. So the moment that starts happening in South African football, we will be able to go to the next level because the money that will be generated from that will be put into a pool and everybody will receive the benefit of it. We're not 100% there yet, but it will happen. And once that happens, once that starts to happen, both collectively and individually for clubs, then we will truly see a shift in where South African football is going to go. The same applies to the FIFA Club World Cup, to the CAF competitions. There's a lot of money being spent from broadcasters and from FIFA to develop these tournaments, and they will indirectly siphon down into football. So I'm very excited and very optimistic about where South African football and football on the continent is going to be within 10, 20 years. But we have some catching up to do, and the Football Conference is going to some extent, and hopefully to a large extent, to get us all there faster.
No, I think your conference is the tonic South African football needs. Which department, in your opinion, is the most undervalued and should be the most important department in a football club?
Well, I guess that really depends on what kind of club
to get us to the level. To get us to the level, let's use the European model.
Right.
To get us to the European level from a club perspective, because let's face it, Evan, some of these clubs are called clubs, but they're not clubs; they're teams.
Yes.
Because there's a difference between a club and a team. A club has a structure. There's different departments. A team is one person and there's no clubhouse. There's nothing. So what is the department, in your opinion, based on this conference, is like, guys, we need to focus in this department if you want to change things?
So I'll answer your question.
Or maybe even two departments or three. It's fine.
So I don't think it's necessarily a department. It's an entire mind shift, right, about what football is and what it means to people in South Africa and what value it adds to people in South Africa in general. So to give you an example, there are a number of teams in the PSL that don't have youth structures, right? They buy and sell them like, fish and chips. So there's no sustainability, right? There's no longevity and there's no legacy. So ultimately, if you are a club in let's say a Johannesburg or a Cape Town, you have a very big demographic. But more often than not, these clubs don't actually have any reach. Yes, there are the exceptions, the bigger clubs, I understand that. But particularly in the smaller clubs, in smaller towns, they don't really add any value to their community. So if you want to understand why our football is where it is because, well, there is no communication, there is no translation to local communities, there's no legacy, right? Clubs are there 1 minute and the next minute they're gone. So for us to be able to truly build football as a legacy in this country, we need to have sustainable football clubs, right? Not teams, not pop up tomorrow, rent a field down the road. Yeah. We need to have legacy. So I've always advocated for sustainability in football. So use the money you spend wisely, but you need to distribute that down into your community and get the entire community behind you as a club and kind of have a reciprocal relationship that is beneficial for everybody in the long term. You will more often than not see, even at third division level, stadiums being full, in smaller communities because those teams have, or those clubs have, engaged and offered their community something, whereas across the road in the PSL stand, unless Kaizer Chiefs or Pirates comes to town, it's empty because there's no connection. So to answer your question, what department Well, whichever department is responsible for creating community engagement and trust, for longevity and legacy, and then hopefully over and above that, contributing to some form of infrastructure. Even if it means just buying a plot of land with fields that you can rent out to your local community and foster that kind of ability to be able to have coaches and players on a pitch, instead of having to pay to rent from municipality or whatever the case is. Then we are actually truly building value in our football. But of course, basically to take it back a bit, further to your question, from a purely professional and business point of view, which department? It's the commercial department, right? The commercial department,
The marketing, I would say.
marketing, commercial,
Yeah.
anything that deals with fan and stakeholder engagement. If you look at a club, and I don't want to necessarily point it at any club, but Kaizer Chiefs as a business is very well run, right? Let's not talk about what's happening on the pitch, just as a business.
It's proper run.
It's very
proper.
well
They
run.
are a great example of a club.
Yes, correct. And they have great commercial people,
Yes.
right? They
No,
talk to
they
their
are
fans,
the.
and that is let's say that is the
No, that's the
top.
That's the benchmark.
But more than half of the clubs in the PSL, for example, don't even have somebody that deals with it, and they take those kind of things for granted. So the moment they employ people in those departments, they will hopefully see an uptake in confidence from corporate and commercial South Africa, with a view of creating relationships and good, relationships in the sense of a brand cooperation and marketing opportunities and generating alternative revenue, so that we can start building, we can build up teams in our communities, but also teams that can compete with Chiefs, Pirates and Sundowns, because at this point in time it's very rare that you see any fan of South African football support any other team than those three, and that's maybe where we need to start, is to build other teams.
And I'll tell you what the key word here is. The key word here is those clubs don't create an emotional connection with the citizens.
Yes.
So that emotional connection, and if you look at Europe, and I've got to look at Europe, and I was in Angola the other day, I saw Petro. Petro has an emotional connection. You can't be a gypsy club. Today you're here, tomorrow you're there, and you take your tent and you move around, and you're trying to build a brand.
Correct.
You got to connect emotionally with the supporters, and the supporters, as you quite rightly said, Ebert, you said earlier on that the small clubs, the ABC Motsepi's, they'll play in a little stadium and there'll be 10,000 people watching them because they're from the village. And I'll tell you, the best club that does this in the NFD, because of that, is Black Leopards. Black Leopards, when I was there was 8,000 people watching average game.
Yeah.
Imagine, NFD, because they connect with the community. And I think that is the key, that the clubs need to understand that you need to connect with your community. And you said, stop building a base. But the unfortunate part is today they are, then they move across. They're just, as I call them, gypsy clubs. And they need to start moving away from that mentality. You need to build a brand. And build a brand takes a while.
So there's a couple of things that you can think about perhaps, and that I've proposed to some people in higher places. First and foremost, we are prioritizing, the players and the player wages, right? To such an extent that we are paying players so much that they have absolutely no desire to go and play in Europe.
Spot on.
So what I've proposed is that we find a way that we take the money that clubs receive and distribute it in a way that incentivizes them to focus on other things. Not necessarily just paying players, right, but developing coaches, developing infrastructure. Of course, it gets shot down because, everything has to go to the players, and you're not allowed to tell anybody how to use their money. But ultimately, until we find a way to prioritize those kind of things, right, where you say to a club, well, you have to spend a minimum amount on fan engagement, right, on community service, You probably won't ever get to that point, but we won't ever be able to build those relationships with our communities, and unfortunately, that's going to lend itself to the gypsy clubs that you mentioned. It's not ideal, but hopefully at some point in time, South African clubs will see the value of connecting with their communities.
Yeah, early on you spoke about the Springboks, and listen, if there's one brand in South African sport that takes us worldwide recognition, and when I go to Europe, and when I go to Portugal, I see people walking around with a Springbok jersey.
Yeah.
There's a Springboks, the brand Springbok stands for something, and it's been created through the years. And we've had our dips, and now we're on a high. And it's going to dip again because that's the nature of sports.
Yeah.
But even when we dip, there's this connection with the Springboks. Why do you think that exists? What is the connection? What is the value of the Springboks? We're talking about brand and your confidence now, that the Springboks connect with the community. Why is that?
I think it's to a large extent winning. But also I think the Springboks and SA Rugby to a large extent appreciate the value, right, of fan engagement. They appreciate the value of what success means and how to not only monetize it but also to create that relationship. It's something that South African football just hasn't been able to do, and even notwithstanding the fact that we have been, perhaps not recently, but in the past, relatively successful, winning AFCON. These are the kind of things that should be leveraged in order to create that kind of trust and confidence that we would want from our fans. Coming third in AFCON in the last iteration was an overachievement, and it's one that a lot of people very much latched onto and said, listen, this is the thing. And I was very positive about it as well. But you haven't really seen the kind of traction that it could have gotten. Women's football, once again, winners of AFCON, right? A lot of people wanted to get involved. Hasn't really happened to the extent that we wanted to. I mean, we very much want a professional league for women in this country, and it's just, unfortunately we haven't gotten there for reasons that we can talk about for days. But ultimately, until we start competing and being competitive in a way that South Africans will be proud of, we're not going to be able to bridge that gap in the same way that the Springboks have. That being said, it is changing. You're seeing that Bafana are selling out stadiums in Bloemfontein and Gqeberha. So these are positive moves. It may well be that the fans in those areas have been, without football for so long.
Yeah, that's also true. They starved.
Exactly. But needless to say, it's a positive move and a move in the right direction. And of course, qualifying for the World Cup and AFCON would just take things so much further. It also lends itself then to being on a platform that the rest of the world will also see. And if you're talking about player development and creating opportunities for our young players and professional players to go abroad, that very much is a very important facet of it, because unless South Africa, Bafana are competing in big tournaments and doing well in big tournaments on a regular basis, whether that's AFCON, whether that's the World Cup, we will not be valued as a country, a footballing country. Our efforts will not be valued. Not saying necessarily that they shouldn't, because I do think that there are a lot of good things.
It comes with credibility.
But it does, exactly. And unfortunately, the perception of a country's, ability to develop footballers is usually merely found within how far and how well they do at international tournaments.
Okay, so here's a question for you. What is brand South Africa from a player's perspective worldwide? How is it seen, brand South Africa, football-wise?
Not well, unfortunately. The position we were in 1996 when we won AFCON has steadily declined to such an extent, and I think these are still the most recent ratings, but we are not even the 10th best rated according to FIFA ratings in Africa. And as you mentioned earlier, it goes towards credibility. If we can't compete at that level and win tournaments, qualify for tournaments, then unfortunately our players suffer from the indignation of not being seen as credible or good. There's a certain element of confirmation bias. I don't believe that on a technical level our players are bad, as people would suggest, or as people would think.
Stop right there.
Now we're veering into your territory.
Yes, because I want to. You were talking about technical, and this is I love it. I'm glad you brought it in, because the biggest challenge, and I talk to my colleagues overseas, the biggest challenge, not the technical ability of our players, it's the character behind that. What is your take on that? Because you deal with some of these guys.
Unfortunately, our players, to a large extent, suffer from a mixture of comfort, and unfortunately, because of the fact that our footballing institutions, although getting slowly and slowly better, I'm talking about academies and clubs, they are compensated more, and the opportunity to be compensated more within South Africa lends themselves to stay at that level without pursuing a different or a better challenge.
Would you say pursuing or having the ambition?
Well, I think it goes hand in hand, right? Because I don't think that our players necessarily suffer from a lack of understanding that Europe is the measure. But when you get into an opportunity or get into a situation where you have to provide for your family, and you can do so by merely staying in South Africa, within the comfort and the confines of your having your family and your community around you, it persuades you into a different kind of decision. And unfortunately, that very much lends itself then to our players not going to Europe, not being tested at that level, not reaching that level, and then ultimately coming back to South Africa, or the South African national team not being able to compete at the high level of, let's say, the Ivory Coast or the Senegals of recent years, Egypt, for argument's sake. Those players all want to go abroad to go and challenge themselves. But when you play them, all their players are playing abroad. They're all playing in Europe.
9 out of 10. Actually, 9 out of 10. Most of them.
So,
but do you think that also contributes to we not having role models? And develop the next generation. I want to be so-and-so, someone that's aspiring. I talk to the youngsters here in South Africa, and they all want to be the players from overseas. None of them want to be the players from South Africa. Is that a question of role model?
I think for the players that are coming through the ranks now, young players, they've never seen a South African player play in the Premier League. Lyle Foster now recently, subsequent to the relegation of Burnley, he's probably been the closest one. But until South Africa and Lyle Foster lift an AFCON or qualify for the World Cup and maybe make it out of the group stage, I don't think they'll ever be taken as seriously as the players from '96. And I think, unfortunately, it's going to take some time for us to create more role models.
Talk about time. Sorry to interrupt. Talk about time. We've run out of time.
Okay. That's too bad.
Yeah, 1 hour.
We could have been here for another
hour. I know. We'll have to make us in episodes. Okay. Yeah, but we've come to the end of our program.
Thank you
very much. Yeah. It was very informative. I like the vision. I like your passion. I have a lot of time for you because you're Afrikaans.
Can you believe it?
And you have the passion for football. Amazing. So, Ebert, bye, donkey.
Thank you very much.
Donkey. We've come to that time of the evening. It's 1 hour is gone. Take care. And remember, character matters. Good night.